The Combine brings rumors of trades and free agent news. A new twist in the Bears' new stadium saga emerges. Prospects are judged, and a fairy tale writes another page in its wonderful story. Hi there, and welcome to the PitchGrid, the podcast that brings you news, insight, and analysis from both sides of the football world, the NFL and the world of soccer, including the EFL Championship, the Premjer League, and much, much more. We've got a full episode for y'all today, as you just heard. So let's jump right on in and head gridside. Let's talk about the new saga twist in the about the Bears Stadium. Folks, it appears that Illinois is finally doing something as they are working on a bill for the Bears to move to Arlington Heights. Hopefully it's a sign of good things to come because the Bears, as was we talked about last week, they were moving to Indiana. It looked like that Indiana was preparing a large package to entice the Bears to move across state lines to try to build a huge stadium and bring a lot of economic infrastructure to the state of Indiana. But Illinois finally decided to respond, and now the House is passing a bill, I believe, that will get the Bears just stay probably in Illinois. I think we all knew that if the Illinois did something, the Bears would probably stay in Illinois and probably in the Chicago area. They just needed the state to do something, and finally they have. It's a good thing ultimately because, like I said last week, this just would have felt weird if they had left the Chicago area in general. Like this, so much history and tradition lives in Chicago with the Bears, and to have that stripped away and make it feel like half the sports town that Chicago truly is would just be really so unfair and unjust to a city that is so passionate about its Bears and loves its football team, and it feels like they would be robbed, even though they would be less than 100 miles away if they moved to Indiana. But right now, it looks like that Illinois is preparing a huge counteroffer, and I think if this goes through successfully, through both the House, Senate, and all that legal process, then I think the Bears will probably stay. I can't see them moving away. The owner is a very sentimental guy. He loves what his family's built there in Chicago, and I can't imagine them going anywhere else other than Chicago. So good news for Bears fans in general who are rooting for this to stay in Chicago, for the state to do something. I think they're doing right by not just their constituents, but the state and the whole of the NFL in general. A huge favor by doing this and finally getting off their arses. So yeah, just a huge, huge, huge bit of news. So yeah, I'm really pleased about that. Really, hopefully this gets done quick. We had a huge trade go down today as Jermaine Johnson was sent to the Titans for Tavondre Sweat. It's a very rare day when you get a player-for-player trade, and we got that today as Jermaine Johnson, who was a huge rush prospect a few years ago, apparently he wanted out of New York. I mean, I don't blame him, honestly. Like, this is a New York's not exactly the greatest place to be if you're, a football fan right now, especially if you're a Jets fan. But or Jets player, really, considering that how that defense really didn't turn the ball over for their offense, who was already abysmal anyway. And yeah, Johnson apparently wanted out. He wants to go play with Robert Saleh. And this is a guy who believed in him when he first got drafted, and I honestly can see it. Like, I don't think it's going to be like a huge earth-shattering move by any means. Um the Titans obviously get rid of a bit of dead cap with Tavondre Sweat leaving. It's not a huge loss for the Titans either. Let's be honest. Like, I mean, yes, they need D line help, but Jermaine Johnson's he's a good able body. I think he didn't impress a ton while at the Jets, but he definitely has the ability that we saw in college to go get the quarterback, and it, there's potential in him, but we just need to see it revitalized. And Robert Saleh, if there's anyone who can do it, it is Robert Saleh for sure. This is, a freakish athlete, and Tavondre Sweat. He's going to obviously add to the defensive line for the Jets. Obviously, he's not going to be huge or anything, but I think he could bring some veteran presence to a young Jets defense already. Honestly, the Jets are just trying to get rid of bodies that they really don't have a ton of. They don't think they really need. So it seems like a good trade on both sides. Uh, Johnson's best year was in New York. Obviously, he's been with the Jets his whole career of 4 years. His best sack total came, I believe, 2023 under Robert Saleh at 7.5 sacks. So and that was his best year. He had a good uh, total tackles of around. He had 11 tackles for a loss, 16 QB hits, 55 combined tackles, and 36 solo tackles, and 19 assists. So he really had a good overall year, really, and it was a good bounce back after a rookie year that didn't show a ton, but he flashed something in that second year. And really, ever since then, though, he's not done much. He had 0 sacks the year after, and then 3 sacks last year. So I think going back to Robert Saleh, that definitely could be someone who can revitalize this career in its early infant stages, and who knows, bring some youth and vision to a Titans defense that wasn't that great last year. So win-win for both teams. Um, Now the interesting question that comes out of this trade, honestly, to me, this signals potentially that the Jets are going to, with the second overall pick, draft either Arvell Reese from Ohio State or Reuben Bain out of Miami. Obviously, these are the two best pass rushers and defensive linemen in this draft, which is already a pretty stacked defensive draft. Um, when you look at it on paper, and honestly, I could see either going, depending on who the front office favors more. If they need someone like a Reuben Bain, I think he's the one to go for because he's just one of the best pass rushers in this draft class, if not the best, honestly. And you know, Arvell Reese is right up there as well, and both can absolutely impact a defensive line instantly. And the question is, who do you favor more? Who fits your scheme better? At this point, the Jets just need young presence and electricity on that defensive line, and as well as they need a good mix because the defensive line these days is a huge, huge piece of your cornerstone if you're building a franchise these days. Just because you need that to help go rush the passer in this day and age. I mean, just look at the last two Super Bowl champions. A defensive line was so key in winning both of those Super Bowl championships. So definitely, drafting on that position is going to be a huge help. And if you can get the hit on the right prospect, I think you're going to do great for the Jets. And speaking of Reuben Bain, today he measured at 30 and 7/8 inch arm span at the combine today. And coming into this, he was rumored to be a little short on the arms, and a lot of the couch coaches and analysts were saying, "Oh, this is a huge knock on him." And honestly, to me, if you watch Reuben Bain's tape, overall, the dude is such a nightmare to guard against. He's such a disruptor, and he played against college teams that are elite NFL level with great players on both sides of on both sides of the offensive line, and the dude wrecked games single handedly. Just look at the Ohio State game, for example. Go look at the entire college playoff run. Just showed how incredible Reuben Bain can be, and honestly, like yes, it can help like disrupt and get under the shoulder pads and all that. I know the advantages of having longer arm span and all that, but at the same time, it's an eighth inch shorter, y'all, than the usual typical 31-inch arm span. Like, let's not kid ourselves. That's not a ton of difference. And according to Adam Schefter, there were teams that had him measuring over 32 inches. So I think it's not exactly an issue of if their arms are exactly right. It's how they're measured and who's measuring them. And I really think this is kind of overhyped by a lot of people, in my opinion. I think Reuben Bain has shown that even if on tape he sometimes doesn't go all in gung ho on a play, he's shown that he can be a disruptor and be a huge impact on any franchise that drafts him. I think it's a huge mistake if he drops out of the top 10, let alone the first round. If he drops out of the first round, I will be absolutely shocked. And because he's just that good a talent, you can't really expect a team. If he drops to past 10, I will be shocked. 9 alone. There's rumors that the Chiefs want him, the Titans want him. The I don't know how you can't want a guy like this with all the other physical attributes that he has and the talent he has to wreck a game single handedly. We've rarely seen this kind of talent, and really the only really talent that I can think of that has been talked about this much. And I know he has the intangibles, but Miles Garrett. Miles Garrett got a ton of hype in his draft process, and obviously he went number one overall in his draft. And yeah, it's just incredible. I don't know. To me, sometimes yes, watching film and looking at measurables is great, but at the same time, like there's only so much the measurables that the combine can do, and I think right now that the whole talk about an eighth of an inch of arm span is not going to impact you that much. And when other teams are measuring you above 32 inches, I think it's going to be fine. And I don't think if you're really convinced about Reuben Bain, you're going to draft him. If you're not, that's fine. But still, I think it'd be a huge, huge shock if this guy falls out of the top 10 in or top 15 of the draft board. Dude's a beast. Another interesting little bit of news coming out of the NFL Combine the last couple of days. The Raiders GM John Spytek was recorded as saying that he expects Maxx Crosby to be a Raider, despite all the speculation, all the smoke of Maxx Crosby wanting out of Las Vegas and wanting to have a trade and all that. Is there smoke to this or is this actual truth? I don't know, honestly. Like it could go either way. Crosby is such a generational pass rusher. Dude is amazing, and there's only one of him. Him and Myles Garrett are two of the top pass rushers in the entire league, and that's not mentioning the likes of T.J. Watt and others. Yeah, I mean it would be a huge mistake for me if the Raiders do let him go, especially if they're trying to build quickly and efficiently. Obviously, they want all the pieces they can to surround Clint Kubiak with modicum of success for next season if they want to do something other than be as terrible as they were last year. But of course, they have to think about cap and all that. I would not be shocked if he was traded. At combine press conferences, there's so much parlance, there's so much prancing around and GM speak. You never really know what's really going on behind the scenes, and honestly, that could be a way to help drive the stock up for a Crosby trade potentially if he were to be traded. The problem is, if you're the Raiders, why do you give up Crosby? You know, it just doesn't seem like the best move right now. And if I think he just signed a contract extension recently, so why give him up? And when he's the star of your franchise right now, really, he is the star. He's the best player on that team. Why give the best player on your team? And I know Fernando Mendoza is going to come in and be all the talk, all the hype coming into next season. But if you give up Crosby, it feels like you're really selling your soul as the Vegas Raiders. And yeah, I can't see them doing it. But it wouldn't shock me also if it did happen, if it was for a much heftier price than what we are seeing right now. We got a couple. So we talked about franchise tags last episode, and two of the candidates we talked about were George Pickens and Kyle Pitts. Well, those have been taken off the free agent board as the Falcons and Cowboys both tagged Pitts and Pickens respectively. Uh, it it's interesting because like these guys 2 years ago we would have said, oh, they were not worth a franchise tag. These guys are not worth keeping another year, especially Kyle Pitts. The guy had not produced as much as his draft hype suggested he would, and honestly, he kind of felt like a bust. But after over 900 yard season as a tight end, like the, he showed the potential last year that he can do it, and it seems like he's been getting better every year the last couple of years. And is Stefanski the key to unlocking the potential that Kyle Pitts has, we're going to see, because this is an offensive coach, and they hired him, obviously, Stefanski, to turn this offense around, to help guide Michael Penix to be the next quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. And if there's one piece that Kyle Stefanski, you know, him and Stefanski wants to really use, it is the tight end. Just look at how he used his offense in Cleveland. David Njoku was a huge piece. And I feel like Kyle Pitts could have a breakout year, depending on how well or what kind of usage he has in the Stefanski offense. But I would not be shocked if Pitts is again used like he was last year, or not more. I can see this happening. Now the question is Pitts actually going to do it? We don't know. Dude has been up and down in his career all ever since he came out of Florida, and we just don't know. We just really don't know. That's the thing with Kyle Pitts. It feels like a huge risk, but at the same time, if it were to work, yeah, I mean, it would be a huge payoff, and I think the Falcons would feel justified and maybe offer him a contract. This is kind of their way of saying, hey, reward our faith in you. We're going to tag you. We're going to make sure that you produce for us. If you produce for us, we'll give you a contract. If not, there's the door. And it seems like already, they've cut ties with, they're going to cut ties with Kirk Cousins. They haven't yet, but they will once the new league year starts, as all reports are suggesting. So, they're already cutting some of the old pieces in to not cut Pitts, who is still kind of young for a player and a tight end. Like, there's a lot of potential here. They just need to unlock it, and Stefanski could be the key to that. Now, Pickens, on the other hand, this is a guy who broke out last year. This guy had an incredible season with Dak Prescott. And honestly, like, it felt like a no-brainer the Cowboys had to franchise tag him because of how well he and CD just terrorized offenses and secondaries with their speed and the ability to catch the ball. Pickens just had an ungodly year with insane catches and insane routes, and he had a career year. And honestly, I don't blame the Cowboys for tagging him. It's the smart move. You signed your running back to a long-term deal, and now you're locking up Pickens for another year. And if he does it again, he backs up his last year with another great, solid year or incredible year again. There's no way the Cowboys are letting him leave without a huge letting him leave, let alone not giving him a huge contract. So yeah, it's similar to Pitts, but it's also betting that Pickens is going to have another great year, and you want that for Dak. You want the consistency. He's never had a consistent offense, really, to be honest. And I mean, besides CD, he's not really had a consistent receiver two outside of him. So to have the wide receiver one and two of Pickens and Lamb is going to be it's a great triplet duo. And if you don't include the tight end and like Ferguson, and if they can improve the offensive line and a couple other receivers to back up Pickens and Lamb, this could be another great year for the Cowboys offense. And they had a great year last year. They were one of the top offenses in the league. Dak was one of the top quarterbacks in the league last year in terms of stats. So to give him another year with Pickens, give more consistency for the offense, give more after a great year with Brian Schottenheimer at the helm. Who knows? Maybe the Cowboys build on their last year and maybe even make the playoffs. Who knows? Depending on how this offseason goes. Another thing to keep an eye on is Trent Williams possibly landing in free agency. There was reports that came out on Monday suggesting that the premier left tackle in the league could be up for free agency because him and the Niners reached a little bit of a rocky road in their negotiations for a new contract, and they were reportedly far apart in terms of the figures that they both wanted to give. Of course, this is nothing new with Trent Williams, let's be honest. Dude has always been a stickler for a lot of money. That's why he left the Commanders, Redskins back in the day. And it's how the Niners got him, honestly. And he's always been kind of a stickler for his money in negotiations, even as a 49er. But the 49ers have always been rather equivalent, rather generous in their giving money to him. And why not? This guy is like the best left tackle in the entire league. And why would you want him to go? John Lynch, in his presser at the combine, he said that the deal is very possible and imminent. Uh, how much smoke is in that? Let's be honest. Like there's talk, you know, like I said earlier with the Crosby thing. GMs have a lot of GM talk. They like to say things in their pressers, and keep things close to the chest. This is another situation I think that could be very, very interesting and spicy come January and March 1st and beyond, because I mean, who wouldn't want Trent Williams? I mean, this is a guy that almost signed with Kansas City a few years ago when he was a free agent after being released by Washington. This is a guy, that is going to be highly coveted and going to get his payday should he land on the market. It's just a question of it's with San Francisco or with someone else. And right now, if it's as far apart as reports are suggesting, I would not be shocked if Trent Williams does hit free agency. I don't think they can tag him again. I don't think he can be tagged. So either they find some common ground, or we're going to have the best free agent hit the market in Trent Williams. Now, of course, that's going to be followed up closely by Tyler Linderbaum, who's in a very similar situation. The Ravens reportedly gave him an AV equivalent to like a record-setting deal that would have been for the market. But it feels like that Linderbaum's also going to hit free agency. It's more likely that Linderbaum hits free agency than Williams right now. But there is a possibility that both could hit the free agent market. And boy, if you're looking for an offensive line help, like those are two guys that would be instant upgrades at any position. I mean, obviously, like there's very few teams that have a great center as great as Linderbaum, and he's going to be a great locker room presence. He's going to be a bully on that offensive line. He's been such a huge, huge part of what the Ravens do offensively. So, especially in the run game. So that's going to be a huge loss for Baltimore should he hit the market. And it's going to be a huge loss for San Francisco if Williams hits the market. Because already this is a team that really suffered when Trent Williams was out of the lineup. If he hits the market, how are you going to replace him if you're San Francisco? This feels like a huge, huge quarter milestone in the season in terms of if they do re-sign him, I think it's going to be fine. They still have all these pieces and all that. But if they don't, there could be some panic stations in San Francisco for a bit. Like that's another piece that they would need to add quickly in free agency, I would assume. I don't think there are some pieces you could potentially draft in this draft that are reasonable prospects, like the tackle out of Miami would be a good option if he fell that low. I doubt he does, but there's some pieces, but it would feel like a huge downgrade compared to Trent Williams. So something to keep an eye on for sure. Another thing to keep an eye on is the situations of Kyler Murray, Tua, and Anthony Richardson. We got reports today from Anthony Richardson's agent that he's going to be seeking a trade, and that the Colts are mutually agreeing that they will give him one should he find someone that will give him that will take him. Honestly, like with Richardson, like it's not going to be a huge steal for the Colts should they trade him. This guy with 28 starts, who does not have a great PR image with, benching himself with the whole tap out situation. And ever since, really, the Colts have looked different. I mean, Daniel Jones looked so good leading this Colts team last year when he was not injured. And, you know, the Colts looked a different team compared to with Daniel Jones than they were with Anthony Richardson. And yeah, it was clear from last year's quarterback battle that Danny Dimes never really had a way to lose this competition as long as he did well, and he did well enough, and Richardson just wasn't cutting it, and he hasn't cut it since those first 5 games when he came into the league guns blazing, and then he got that concussion, that injury, and it wasn't a concussion, but he got that injury, and ever since his confidence has just been shot. I think if he got a good coach that could mentor him and mold him the right way, I think Richardson could do something potentially. I do think there's something there. Those 5 games were not a fluke, I don't think. I think if he had stayed healthy that year, that confidence would have only grown. I just think there's something going on behind the scenes, I think, with Anthony Richardson. And I'm not blaming Shane Steichen for this. There's no proof, there's nothing like that. But there's something that just shot Richardson's confidence so quickly that he just was tapping himself out of a game for no reason. And ever since then, that just really hurt his image. And he's never recovered. It's so unfortunate for him. Really, and it's kind of unfortunate for Tua as well. I mean, look, this is a guy that it sounds like there was going to be a trade for him. Jeff Hafley is being ruthless and making sure this is a full rebuild. There have been no prisoners. We saw last week that Chubb and Tyreek Hill and a couple of others like Westbrook Akine. They were not gonna be spared the scythe that was Jeff Hafley and the new GM and Eric Sullivan. And Tua is going to be next. Apparently they just do not trust him, and I kind of get it. After the last couple of years, Tua has not looked what he was when he first started, and it's so unfortunate because Tua, has been more the victim of bad circumstances and just bad luck. It hasn't been him necessarily until the last year or so, and before then it was just concussion after concussion after concussion, and I really think that really has just messed with his brain, literally and figuratively, and not being out on the field and having to constantly recover mentally and physically. It takes a toll on you, and I think too it's just being a huge victim of circumstances and just bad luck. And unfortunately, I don't know who's going to take him. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, I don't think you want Tua. If you're let's say the Cardinals or you know the Jets, I don't think you jump at the chance to take Tua. He could be a solid developmental piece, but I don't know if he's gonna. Do you want to develop Tua? Do you want to risk it? Is the question I have. And is he worth that kind of risk, considering his injury history and whatever his mental state is at this point? Those are my big concerns with Tua, honestly, and I just don't know if you can really feel comfortable taking him in a trade. But it'll be interesting to see where he does go. If he does go to a team that absolutely needs a quarterback, they're gonna have to. They're gonna have to develop him quickly because otherwise he's gonna be what he was in Miami and the last couple of years. And I don't. That's not the quarterback you want if you need a quarterback right now. And then with Kyler Murray, honestly, it's just been he never hit the ground running, and he had some bad injuries. And there was that one year he went 9 and they went. The Cardinals went 9-0. The Cardinals were looking fantastic. They looked like they were one of the best teams in the league, and then they fell apart. And ever since then, the Cardinals have just not looked the same. They have not. They have not looked good, and Kyler hasn't looked as good since either. And honestly, okay. There's talk like there's been talk like the Packers want him as their backup, or the Jets potentially have been a huge team linked with Kyler Murray being traded to. I could see the Jets one. I could. With the quarterback situation there being an absolute mess. I don't think they want to start Justin Fields another year. If they don't get another quarterback, they probably will have to start Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor. And that seems like a nightmare for Jets fans, and I do not wish that upon them. Shout out our good friend Errol Marks from Jabba in the Mouth, who is a Jets fan. I don't know how you do it, buddy. I really don't. But yeah, Kyler, is he the long term solution? I don't think so. But if he's a backup, he could be a good backup, win you a couple of games, and depending on how long your starter's out. If he's with the Jets, though, he's going to have to be the starter, and I don't think the Jets are going to be a good spot for him either in terms of confidence or a lot. The theme with this group is just confidence. None of them have confidence, and none of them have the skills that everyone thought they would have, and it's very unfortunate because these guys have talent. I mean, we've seen Kyler do incredibly crazy plays with his legs, where he's run around for a long time and found a guy and in the end zone with an incredible play and incredible throws that he's had at times. And yeah, it just wasn't going to work out in Arizona. Arizona's got a sneaky good team. This is a team that I thought would make some inroads last year and make the playoffs. I I was wrong, obviously, but this is a team that has so much talent on both sides of the ball, and Kyler honestly held them up. And last year, obviously, he was hurt for a lot of it, but when he was playing, he still didn't help them any. So it's just, I thought he could take a step forward as well last year. Obviously, I was wrong on that one too, but still, this is the market on him feels limited. And if you're asking him to be a day one starter, I think it could work depending on the coach who gets him. I just don't know if I trust him like in a situation like the Jets. Again, no offense to the Jets. It's just I don't think he's going. It's just going from same situation to same situation, except the Jets feel more of a disaster right now than the Cardinals, just because the Cardinals actually have some talent on both sides of the ball compared to the Jets. But I don't know. It's a very these are guys that are disappointing as well. You expected a lot more out of them, and they just aren't going to get it done. Their futures are just so uncertain. It's going to be very interesting to keep eye on all three of these quarterbacks headed into free agency and the trade deadline. Another huge combine news piece that dropped earlier this week was the subject of replay and its effect on officiating this year or in the next few years, depending on the. This, of course, comes about because of the CBA with the refs coming up for contract talks this coming year, and right now it does not feel like they're anywhere close. The NFL and the refs union are anywhere close to having a agreement, and the competition committee is reviewing a lot of rule changes, including centralizing officiating to the New York office and an expanded use of technology, even giving replay the ability to throw certain flags. Like the examples that were given were a couple of personal fouls that occurred in a couple of games last year. Oddly enough, both examples given in the ESPN article that I read were they both involved the Seahawks. Once in the Super Bowl when Josh Jobe butted heads with Stephon Diggs, and the other was when Derek Hall stomped on a Rams player. I just found that kind of funny, just because it involved the Super Bowl champion both times, and obviously, like they can't help the examples that were used, but those are kind of clear examples that they could come up with, and it's kind of funny that it involved both times the Seahawks. Anyways, this could be huge in terms of officiating and what happens the next couple of seasons. Are we going to see? People have asked for an expanded use of technology and instant replay and officiating. I think should the lockout of the refs happen, we actually might be more of a position than we were in 2011 when the last refs lockout happened to use technology and maybe just maybe have a we might get to see robo refs sooner than we thought. Not just as a help for the on field refs, but as a necessity because they're gonna need the extra assistance, especially if we don't want a 2011 situation where we had the replacement refs and we had the fail Mary and those awful calls the first few weeks of that season. That we just don't want that again. And obviously we're 15 years away from that now. Crazy to say. And we have the technology. Look, we had the measurements done last year with technology for first downs. And honestly, that could be used a lot more often these next couple of years, depending on this whole ref lockout situation. And it doesn't feel like we're closer to any settlement reached than we were earlier last year. So who knows? It's just going to be so interesting to see what in the world are we gonna get a more are we gonna get my question is how is it gonna be more like instant cam replay from the refs? Are we gonna get more UFL style of officiating? There's no really known part of this that we really know except that it's gonna be expanded use of technology, and we don't even know to what extent that means. There's just a lot of unknowns, and I think this could prove a lot of people right that oh, the replay is going to help a lot, making the calls better, or it's going to be a complete disaster, and people are going to be proved right in that way. There's got to be some happy middle ground, right? Like we the beauty of sport, right, is to have, even if you have replay, you still have the on-field refs making calls, and sometimes it's going to be right, sometimes it's going to be wrong, and it's just luck of the call. And sometimes calls decide games, sometimes they don't. And obviously, we want the calls to be right. We want the game to be judged fairly for both teams. It's not always going to happen, and I think people could get mad even with robo refs or skycam judges or whatever is going to be used. No one's going to be really truly happy, let's be honest. There's going to be someone that's going to not like any rules that are done, no matter how much is going to, and this is going to be out of necessity too. So how clunky is it going to be? Who knows? We're nowhere near this actually being implemented yet. We don't know exactly the extent yet, but it is interesting to think about, considering this could be a very real possibility in the next couple of seasons. So definitely something to keep an eye on, especially considering how in the world's going to impact a season. Could you imagine this being like the main storyline of a Super Bowl, for example? Like just a robo ref being the center of a Super Bowl. That would be something, wouldn't it? Let's head pitch side now that we have gone over all the grid stuff, and let's recap some stuff from the Premier League and the Championship. We saw Borough slip up with two straight draws these last couple of games, and that's brought the pack up to them a little bit. Millwall with a couple of emphatic wins, just absolutely emphatic. Um, well, they slipped up over the weekend, but they rebounded with a huge, emphatic win over Birmingham in the midweek, and they've closed the gap to 4 points. When it was about a 9 point gap for the men from Millwall. Ipswich and Hull closed their gap to 7. However, both of them have they've dropped some results lately, including one that we'll get to in a little bit. So it's kind of an interesting little promotion race that we're getting. It's a 7 point gap to second for Ipswich and Hull, but Millwall have a 4 point gap to second, which is Middlesbrough, and Middlesbrough are 5 points behind Coventry. So already the table has gone shifted dramatically ever since that loss to Coventry for Middlesbrough a couple of weeks ago already. It's incredible what a couple of weeks can do in the championship. They are starting to lose their pace on the playoffs. They had a couple of weird results this last couple of games, and that's including that huge hammering at the hands of Millwall. After what it seemed like they were fixing their form on the road, they just go to Millwall and get smacked. Obviously, Millwall is not a place that you go to and win a ton, but still, like it felt like Birmingham were on the rise. They were peaking at the right time, and then also they just get a very anticlimactic halt. And guess who they play next? They play Middlesbrough at home, and Middlesbrough is good on the road, but Birmingham is really good at home. So this is going to be very interesting as well to see. What will be hard for that game is that Birmingham is not going to have one of their best players in John Solis. Um, Available, as he got a red card in the Millwall game. So that's going to be a huge loss for them. Shout out to one of our good listeners, Luke. He he's a faithful listener, and I appreciate him, my good friend. And yeah, as a Middlesbrough fan, hope we beat you, man. But all always good having good banter with you, my brother. Anyways, Wrexham, they got right back on track from the Millwall loss after a couple of incredible games. They came back against Ipswich twice to beat them in an incredible game, 5-3, an 8-goal thriller in which Wrexham got the better of Ipswich Town at home at the race course. A huge statement win for the Red Dragons, and they're back in the playoff places again. They slip out, they go to 10th, and they're back in the playoff places. It's incredible, this championship. That's why we love it so much. There's just so much chaos, and you never know what's going to happen week to week. It might look like one team's doing well, and then all of a sudden they're slipping up, and then all of a sudden they'll turn around and be great again, and you never know. Just the beauty of this league. It's chaotic, it's fun. But yeah, Wrexham looked so good in that game. There was a lot of great attacking play. Heart Attack City for sure. But Wrexham just showed that they have the extra bit of quality compared to a team that just got relegated from the Premier League, and they really just Ipswich just did not look on their best game this last in that game, and yeah, they dropped valuable points there in that game. Um, and then they went and beat Pompey 3-1 in midweek as well. So the Red Dragons definitely have picked up some momentum against, and that was against the Pompey side that really has been picking up some points lately and distancing themselves from the relegation battle. Let's head to the relegation battle. Speaking of which, West Brom and Leicester, who are huge clubs, obviously. Leicester, even though they got a point against Middlesbrough in the midweek game, these two feel like surefire relegation candidates. And, West Brom dropped points after leading 1-0 in the game against Charlton. They dropped points again to Nathan Jones and company, and as a result, Eric Ramsey was officially sacked by West Brom after no wins in 9 games. That's incredible. This was a West Brom team that under Ryan Mason, they weren't doing great, but they were at least floating above water and they were doing okay. And then they let him go. They get Eric Ramsey, who had quite a bit of success in MLS with Minnesota United and got them to the conference semifinals, and he blows it. He absolutely blows his opportunity in English football to manage a team and what some would consider a pretty big club in the championship in West Brom. And now they're down there with Leicester City, who is in the relegation zone right now, and both are staring at relegation right in the face. And honestly, if both do not start picking up a lot of points quickly, these two could be going down quickly, or one of them is, and because Blackburn is picking up points. Blackburn is actually winning games and drawing them and looking much more of a decent team than they had earlier this year and earlier in the season after what was it, no wins in like 13. Blackburn's pulled together some points recently and some good wins as well, and really just started to distance themselves a little bit from the relegation battle. It's not by much, of course, but and they are actually further ahead of West Brom and Leicester than you would have expected. And honestly, I wanted to talk about this because Eric Ramsey came from MLS, and I like to cover MLS, and it's just watching West Brom, it's incredible how certain tactics and methods and ways of approach can work in like a league of MLS's structure. And yes, MLS is improving and getting better in the quality of play and all of that, but still, there's something about the championship and just which those tactics that would work in the MLS, and this is a lot the tactics that Eric Ramsey used a lot at Minnesota United, they just do not work in the championship. And we saw multiple times how this West Brom team got punished for the what sometimes felt like a very conservative approach. It didn't feel like it was conservative in MLS. In MLS, when Minnesota United was playing under Ramsey, it felt like they were a free-flowing attacking team. They pressed you really well, and they were able to get some great attacking play. I mean, goodness, they finished fifth, and like I said, they finished in the conference semifinals. In the Western Conference semifinals against Seattle, they lost, but that's much better compared to the last few years they had under Adrian Heath and Minnesota United. Um, it was probably one of the better seasons in Minnesota United history, and yet he looks awful at West Brom, and fans want him out. Of course, there's so much animosity between the fans and the players. We saw the Isaac Price incident at Pompey when they got shellacked at the hands of Pompey, and yeah, he had to go. Eric Ramsey had to go, but it's incredible just how stark the difference is. It felt like at times. I think some people said that he plays a lot of five at the back, and there's been teams that have done this five at the back well. But it's incredible how you can play five at the back sometimes. Which, if you don't know what five at the back is, it's usually three center backs and a couple of wing backs usually are on the field and a couple of midfielders. But it's a more defensive position. I mean, we saw Rob Edwards in Middlesbrough play a five at the back a lot, especially at the beginning of the season, and it worked rather well. Middlesbrough started out rather well, and look where it's gotten them here so far in the season. But man, it just and Preston I think did it for a time too, and it was kind of a fad at the beginning of the season to play five at the back because of Rob Edwards I think and a few other coaches just doing it so well. But now it's kind of faltered, and not as many teams are doing it anymore, which is so fascinating to me. How tactics and the flow of games can switch so quickly. So it's just very fascinating to see the distinct difference in tactical approaches in MLS in the championship, and how in one league it can work and the other just does not work. And Ramsey didn't never change his tactics. And that was another problem. He stuck with one principle. And as a Middlesbrough fan, we saw what happened with Michael Carrick when he never changed his tactics. It got him sacked. And when you are stubborn to a fault and it's not getting you the results that the fans or the board wants, this is the result. And unfortunately for West Brom fans, who do you hire? Like Wayne, you know, Wayne Rooney could be the result here. Like Tony Mowbray's not going to come walking back to you after last season, and plus his health concerns and all that. You're not going to get, Gary Rowett's hired by Leicester City already, so you're not going to get the wizard of escaping relegation. Uh, eh, yeah, I mean, who do you get? Who do you get that wants to come to West Brom? That's really the question. Like, could you go to the Cardiff City guy? You could go. You definitely don't want to go with an unproven guy now. You've done that twice. Strike three would get you relegated, and Birmingham City fans know all about that after what happened a couple of years ago. So yeah, you don't want that to happen again. After firing Wayne Rooney, they got relegated, and honestly, it does feel like how that Birmingham City season ended tragically for the Blues. Other huge pieces of news included Sheffield Wednesday officially got relegated. We all knew this was going to happen. It was just an inevitable time of win. And officially, after the Steel City Derby on Sunday, they were relegated. In rather uh, Chris Wilder fashion. Obviously, the dude was not shy about holding his feelings of relegating Sheffield Wednesday and how he enjoyed that, I think, a lot. Um, and then to top that all off, after the official relegation, there was a takeover bid that's projected to be over $42 billion, and it fell apart. And there's so much that went on during this that it's crazy that you know after it felt like they were going to have a stable ownership again, the club is going to rise up again. They're now back to square one on the administration and who's going to be the new owner, and now you're being relegated. There's so much going on Wednesday right now. It's just insane. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, honestly. It's just been such a miserable week for Owls fans, and I feel for you, Owls fans, really, I do. It's so tragic. A club like Sheffield Wednesday just getting relegated and then getting kicked while it's down is so it's got to be hard. Man, it's the reality of club football. It really is. You can go from being okay to having this kind of a season like Sheffield Wednesday's having, -7 points. You're having a transfer embargo. You're having to do emergency loan signings of Senny Dieng from Middlesbrough for goalkeeper for a couple of games, and yeah, it's just crazy the predicament that Sheffield Wednesday is in right now. It's better than when they had the previous owner, but still, we won't mention his name. But it's still it still feels pretty bleak right now in Sheffield if you're a Wednesday fan. Let's go to the Premier League real quick. Arsenal absolutely destroyed Tottenham in the North London derby on Sunday, 4-1. It never felt close, even after they were equalized. Tottenham equalized in the first half at halftime. Once Arsenal scored the second goal, it never felt close. And Arsenal reasserted themselves back to a 5-point cushion at the top of the table. Sunderland are losing their pace with on the top seven, and it's really no fault of the players who are giving it their all. It's just a huge injury crisis. They've lost a lot of their good players that were doing a lot of damage for them at the beginning of the season and really having a huge impact. And now they're having to rely on several players, and of course, fatigue is setting in as well. And I think we're finally starting to see, Sunderland's going to be safe. I don't think we're going to see Sunderland relegated or anything like that. They built up enough of a points cushion to keep themselves safe, but I don't think they're going to be in Europe. Like, it would have been cool to see Sunderland making it into Europe, even though I'm not a huge Sunderland fan as a Middlesbrough fan. But still, they had been the champion of the EFL teams potentially being, not being just relegation fodder all the time. So, it's cool. It was cool seeing them succeed. And of course, Leeds is succeeding as well. They're picking up points. They're staying afloat in the Premier League as well. And they're showing that as an EFL team coming up from the Championship, you don't just have to go straight back down to the Championship. You can succeed, and I think we're seeing a blueprint with Sunderland and Leeds. Both are recruiting in different ways, but we're seeing that you can do it. It's just a question of smart recruiting and all that, like we talked about at the beginning of the season. Um, who's not doing too good though? It's Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest is down bad, bro. They really are. Liverpool, they played on Sunday. Liverpool thought they had scored with McAllister. It got disallowed with VAR. This was in the 90th minute, and then a few minutes later, he scores again, and it's allowed, even though it looks offsides. Virtual offsides has him on by like a fingernail. It was that close, and because of that, Liverpool snatched all 3 points in a time where now Nottingham Forest is just 2 points from safety because they're 2 points afloat at the above the relegation zone because West Ham picked up some more points, and West Ham is just making a huge valiant charge under Nuno, um, and looking rather like they could survive if they keep this going, this little run of momentum going that West Ham is on. They had a crazy draw against. I can't remember over the weekend, but it was a crazy draw. It was end to end stuff. Just no one could score. Man, West Ham is on a charge, but Forrest so unlucky, and you could tell it was Vitor Pereira's first game, and he was so devastated when that McAllister goal went in and was ruled to be a good goal. Man, Vitor Pereira was crushed, and I mean that's kind of the coaching you need. If you're Forrest, you really didn't have the passion from Sean Dyche a lot at the time. You kind of need a coach like Vitor Pereira to have that energy and to feel the pain. It's as horrible as it was to lose like that. At least it seems like he cares, and hopefully he can guide Forrest to safety. Of course, if you're a Forrest fan, you don't want to go back to the championship. The championship is only going to get stronger, man. This championship next year is going to be insane. I can tell you what, you're going to have Wrexham and Birmingham probably if neither make it to the Prem. You're going to have, Wolves. You're going to have Burnley again. It's going to be a bloodbath. I can't say the word, but Burnley's looking certain to be relegated. Even despite a draw with Chelsea over the weekend, it doesn't look good. For them or Wolves, who are almost like they've got one foot in the championship right now. It's 9 points for Wolves. I think it's like with Sheffield Wednesday. It's only a matter of when at this point for Wolves, and they're kind of their January window kind of summed that up. They were trying to be um they're trying to be a star championship team with the signings they made like Adam Armstrong. So this is going to be interesting to see the championship next year, but the other part of this relegation battle is Tottenham. They're only 5 points above the relegation zone, and honestly, and Tottenham fans are pretty much preparing for it. And I don't know if they will get relegated. I think it would take a lot for Tottenham to get relegated, but still, it's looking like a possibility now. That they're just not performing too well. I think Forest or West Ham probably will eventually just West Ham can't go on this run forever, right? And I don't think Tottenham are gonna do enough. If they do enough under Igor Tudor to get relegated, I will be shocked. And to have Tottenham in the championship would be fascinating. Be really weird, but they'd have to do a lot of dismantling to be in the championship, and that would be something else to see. Considering the pedigree and the stature that Tottenham has had for so long. But yeah, it's crazy. The relegation battle is heating up, and probably the most fascinating aspect of this Premier League season, besides maybe the top four race. Manchester United getting that result on Monday against Everton was huge, and they're in the top four again. Another team that really I kind of predicted it earlier this year, but when Brentford was talked about as a relegation candidate, I believe I said, yeah, we got to hold off on that for a bit because this is Brentford. They've done a lot of good. And look at them, they're top 7, and you gotta get so much credit to Keith Andrews and company at Brentford. They have done so well to keep themselves in 7th place in the Premier League when it looked like they were certain relegation candidates, and yet they're nowhere close. So it's really cool to see a team like Brentford doing so well. Let's head to the Champions League, man. There are so many good stories here. Let's start though with our fairy tale story that we covered last week. Bodo Glimt, they did it. They went to the San Siro in Milan and won 2-1 and 5-2 on aggregate in the tie to move on to the last 16 for the first time in club history in the Champions League. They also are the first Arctic Circle team to make the last 16 of the Champions League and are the first Norwegian team since 1996 1997 when Rosenborg did it. It's so cool, man. This, like I said last week, I mean, there's not much more to say. Like, than I did last week. But here's their wage bill, by the way. This is a team in Bodo Glimt that have a weekly wage bill of 140,000 euros, which is 7.3 million euros a year, and the market value is 57 million euros. Compare that to the likes of Manchester City, who have like triple that, or even quadruple that, is in the Champions League. Or, look at Liverpool, who has a lot more than that, with all the signings they've had in the recent years. And this is a team that they have beaten City, Atletico Madrid, and Inter twice in their past 4 Champions League games. Of course, this is a team that hasn't played since November. They didn't even win the league when they were playing, and yet here they are. They're at they went to the Metropolitano in Madrid, won there. They went to the San Siro, won there. So I don't think we can say anymore that this is just a plucky underdog team. This is not just, a team that does good at home and doesn't do well on the road. No, they went to 2 incredible environments in Europe and won. And now, I think we can say they're not awed anymore by this. They're not, stunned by the spectacle of it all we saw. I think they're now used to it. And, they've gotten plenty of rest, but also you could say that's somewhat of rest as well. And yet, in psychology, it's a part of this as well. Having the confidence and the assurance that they can do this kind of stuff is part of how they're doing so well as well. But man, it's such an incredible story. And to see them doing well, I think at this point we've got to say that Bodo, even though I don't think they're going to win the Champions League, they probably won't. But to see them go this far, you want to see them go as far as possible. And, they're going to get Manchester City or Sporting Lisbon of Portugal. These are 2 teams in City and Lisbon and Sporting that will expect to win. That is the requirement at both of these clubs. They will expect to win and be one of the final 8 teams in the Champions League. They will expect to win this tie, but Bodo Glimt is going to have some other ideas coming into this. They'll be playing not just for Norway, they will be playing for the underdogs and sports. And they represent the little guy, Bodo Glimt does. And this is Norway's chance to take control of football and show that they are not just here to participate, they are here to win, and they are here to compete. And that is something that you don't see very often. It's a football manager style story, and I love it as an avid football manager player. I love it, and I want to see more of this. I really do. It is such a cool story, man. The best story in sports right now. You can't tell me there's another story that's better than this in sports right now. I will argue that. And if you have a better one, drop in the comments of this episode. I need to hear it because I want to know what's better than Bodo Glimt right now. I really do. Moving on, we had another crazy game. That Atalanta, they were down 2-0 coming home to play Borussia Dortmund, and they won that game. They came back and won on a penalty in the 97th minute to advance past Borussia Dortmund into the last 16. And because Galatasaray beat Juventus in their tie, Galatasaray, by the way, advancing to the last 16 for the first time in 12 years. Crazy for the Turkish club, and huge plaudits for them for that one. But man, Atalanta is now the sole representative of Italian football after beating Borussia Dortmund. And what a collapse, by the way, for Dortmund. and they were one of the better teams in the Bundesliga this year, and yet they just fell apart away from home. And man, they gave it a good fight. They really did. But the 97th minute penalty killed it and killed any momentum Borussia Dortmund might have had. And Atalanta, there's absolute limbs there for that club, and the blue, and it's going to be incredible seeing how they're going to do after this. I don't think Atalanta is going to move on much farther. They aren't the Atalanta of last year. They aren't nearly as invincible as they were last year, but they keep Serie A a little bit alive despite them being the only one of four teams in Italy. And it looked like there would be zero. But congrats to Atalanta for the huge mental stability to come back and win this. Huge applause to them for that. And like I said, Galatasaray is the other big story in this because they went on to beat Juventus, and a Turkish club getting to the last 16 is pretty cool. So it's gonna be fascinating to see who matches up with who, because there's different pathways of who can play who. But right now these teams are very grateful to get to the last 16, and it's only going to get harder from here, and we're only going to get better games and better ties from here on out. So strap on in, boys. Champions League is going to only get crazier. MLS is back. We had our first week of MLS action last week. LAFC thumped Inter Miami 3-0, and it frustrated Messi a lot. Of course, there was the whole story of him reportedly storming into the ref's changing room, but MLS said no, he did not, and as did Inter Miami, and other people are saying that MLS cleared him after investigating and said that he did not enter the ref's changing room. Refs said that he didn't do it, but he went somewhere in LAFC Stadium. And Luis Suarez, if Luis Suarez is the one to restrain you, man, you're down bad. You're down bad if Luis Suarez, the guy who bites people, is trying to restrain you and make sure you don't cause a scene somewhere in the bowels of the LA Coliseum. So, yeah, it's crazy that we had to have Messi of all people, who's gotten a bit more chippy and more competitive since the World Cup. You wouldn't have thought that before the World Cup, but ever since then, there's been a switch that's flipped with Messi, and he's been a lot more competitive. And he showed that after being thumped in a game that LAFC just showed their brilliance and just showed how good this team can be. Now, Inter Miami is not done by any means. This is only just week one. So, they're still a really good team. It's just they happen to come against another good team, and who knows how this game will impact the rest of the season. But it's going to be fascinating to see what happens after this. FC Cincinnati squeaked out a win against Atlanta United 2-0. They scored their first goal in the 80th minute, and their second a few minutes later. Atlanta showed a lot of guts to hang around for 80 minutes. We didn't expect it to hang around this long in a game against one of the better teams in MLS, but they did, and huge credits to Atlanta for that. It's just eventually they caved after some good defending for a while. It just it was coming. The second half just felt like FC Cincinnati was going to score a goal eventually. It just was a matter of when. It's kind of crazy about that. Nashville and San Diego, absolutely impressed. Nashville's was the more impressive to me, just because they beat New England Revolution side that was competing for the playoffs last year, while San Diego just beat up on hapless Montreal. So Sam Surge and Hani Mukhtar, of course, are incredible. Sam Surge, he's going to be up there for the Golden Boot. I don't think we can all deny that. I don't think we can deny that because Sam Surge is just that good a goal scorer. And he's already got 2 goals this season right off the bat. So he's got a good start in that Golden Boot race. So if you want someone to keep an eye on for that, keep an eye on Sam Surge after that new contract extension he had last week too. Man, DC United pulled a stunner on last year's Supporter Shield winners in Philadelphia Union, 1-0. I still expect Philly to be a good team, but man, I was not expecting this score line for sure coming out of that coming out of the last week. Another huge story was Charlotte FC trying to apparently lure Antoine Griezmann away from Atletico Madrid. I don't think it's going to happen. There's been talks that it could potentially. I think though right now it's still just talks. There's not anything like official happening yet. But yeah, that was an interesting bit of news as well. Also, Toronto cannot get Josh Sargent into the team fast enough. They lost a 3-2 game And yeah, they needed his goal scoring opportunities. But like Georgi Mihailovic, Daniel Shallowy and Josh Sargent, that's gonna be a trio once they get all three incorporated into the squad. Toronto, I think they could be a very interesting team when Sargent is acclimated into the squad and all that. But right now, yeah, they're gonna need him because they obviously needed a striker and someone to help boost the attacking threat there in Toronto. But yeah, it was a great week of MLS. A lot of good score lines, like New York Red Bulls beating up on Orlando City in a good game. New York Red Bulls just showed they were a better team. Um, in a great game, honestly. LA Galaxy and NYCFC, they tied, and I mean you saw flashes of the team in LA Galaxy that won MLS Cup a couple of years ago, but then they had a red card, and NYCFC was able to take advantage of it and get a penalty and equalize, and take advantage of it. And yeah, Galaxy definitely need Ricky Pooch back soon, and it's not going to be soon, but still, you saw that there are definitely some weaknesses still in this LA Galaxy team, but definitely they have a bit more of a presence now that they actually have a striker. Charlotte tied with St. Louis as well, which was a rather interesting result to me considering, Charlotte last year, I know St. Louis is better, right? But at the same time, like Charlotte, I expected to kind of win this one. But, St. Louis just showed a lot of guts at home in their home opener. And yeah, it was a pretty good game, honestly, that one. San Jose also stomped on Sporting Kansas City after a tight first few minutes. An injury caused Sporting to just give up in the first half. They went down 2-0 by halftime and just never was close after that. So yeah, great week of MLS. Looking forward to the next week. We've got even more good games coming up. And I'm so excited to see how this MLS season plays out. And with that, that is another episode of the Pitch Grid done for the day. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, a rating or review goes a very long way. And also, if you're on YouTube, give us some high points. That's really going to help other people see us and see our content. If you enjoy our content, please share it. And, we would love any and all people to join us here at the 9232, which, our supporters are amazing. You are the supporters section that always is going to have our backs, and we appreciate it. You are the fuel behind this show, honestly. And we appreciate every single one of you that listens. We will be back soon with more chaos, commentary, and coverage from the world of soccer and the NFL. But until next time, y'all, stay sharp.